Hello and welcome to the annual State of the University address. Yay, we're finally here. No COVID. Thank you all in the room. Thank you all out on in our virtual community. I'm very, very excited to be with you today. Our strategic plan gives us a framework for reporting out on our key indicators that we will use as a community to assess how we're doing as a university in meeting our established goals and supporting the success of our students, faculty, staff, and alums. So each year from going forward, we will reflect back on the prior academic year. This report will be discussed with the Board of Trustees at their October meeting, and then with the PAU community in early November. This year, for a variety of reasons, mostly including our efforts to be ready for the opening of this campus in November, I'm sharing the academic year 21-22 report with you today. So what we will talk about today, a little bit of context for our work, give a little bit of a sense of PAU by the numbers, focus especially on the strategic plan, living our values, and then thinking a little bit ahead. So this is simply a report out, not a town hall, not a conversation, but we will send out a survey for any follow-up questions, recommendations, ideas, especially for data you think that should be included, that we're not including. And the slides have a lot of data. So we will share this whole presentation with you after the recording, along with the recording after the session. All right, let's step back a little bit and set the context of the critically important work that you all do here at PAU. 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness. Probably that number is up. 1 in 6 adolescents experience mental illness. Suicide is now the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-olds. Mental health since the pandemic has exacerbated these numbers and concerns. Over a 25% increase in the prevalence of anxiety and depression, and 43% of psychologists are reporting an increase in patients. I suspect that's a number that is lower than actually what is in the world. In California, in particular, in the next decade, close to 40% of psychologists will be retiring. By 2028, the therapists' demand will be 40% more than the supply. We are already seeing the impact of these numbers in California. Our own county here, Santa Clara County, has declared a mental health crisis. It's difficult for any of our agency partners, including the county, to fill openings for mental health workers. San Diego County this year had needed 8,100 behavioral health workers to meet their present demand. We had at one point over 600 openings in the region. So how do we narrow the workforce gap in California? Something that I think is really important for you, I want to should give you a picture here. Something we don't fully appreciate all the time in California is the role that the nonprofit private universities play in the state. There's a lot of attention on the UCs and the CSUs, which are fabulous. We love our public school systems. But in California, over a quarter of undergraduates get their education from the private nonprofits, and well over 50% of graduate students get their education from us. And most surprisingly, perhaps, 93% of the clinical psychologists, applied psychologists, and counselors in California come from the private nonprofit sector. That's us, folks. We are the behavioral health workforce in the state, and I suspect in many other communities as well. So what that means for us is how important our work is, how important it is to do the training and education and clinical work that we do to meet this demand. Okay, so in general, Palo Alto University is the 4th leading producer of degrees in these fields. And behind national, not an accredited program, TCSPS and Pepperdine. So it's really, really powerful, the work that we do. And I think the community is really starting to understand our role in developing well-trained, ready behavioral health community. But I think it's also important to point out that our role is so much more than graduating well-educated psychologists and counselors. Our faculty and students are engaged in the critical research that's generating the knowledge that we need to address the needs of the community as well. In a lot of our partner institutions, a lot of other institutions do not place the emphasis that PAU places on that important work. We are engaged in training and outreach to community partners, locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally, to bring best practices and latest research to those settings. We're being asked for input all the time now on legislation, on policy, on practice. And that's because we have the scholars and practitioners doing the work that really puts us at the forefront. This sets PAU apart. Our consistent focus on excellence in research, teaching, clinical training, and service. The community sees and understands this. And I see it and appreciate it very, very much. Of course, our students and alums, I mean, we could have had 7,000 slides demonstrating the incredible accomplishments of our students and our alums. These are just a few huge leadership positions, cutting edge research, important developments in practice. If you go to the PAU newsletter and you just look at the clips from 2021-22, which is the academic year we're focusing on, you can get the idea of how incredible our students, alums, and faculty and the work that they're doing. I really recommend you go back and look at some of those newsletters that you might have missed, and shout out to the EA team for those wonderful newsletters. All right, let's look at PAU by the numbers. I think these are what we're trying to accomplish here, is to have all of us be familiar with kind of what we do, what it looks like, how we do it, and then what our goals are so that we know where we're trying to head. Again, we're focusing on the academic year 2021-22 with these numbers. I'm also going to say right up front, we all know our challenges with our data systems. I'm looking at Julia in the room here. I'm looking at Erica. I'm looking at our IT team. We know we have challenges with the integration of our data. Huge shout out to our institutional research team who has to pull these data from many, many sources. And we are working really hard to fix a lot of these issues going forward. So the numbers that I'm presenting to you have taken a lot of work by a lot of people to get us this far. And I'm hoping every year we get better and better at being able to just pull those numbers easily. Every division at the university is involved in producing these data. So big thank you to all the divisions for the work that you're doing to get these numbers into our annual report, which then gets us to be able to present them. Okay, so hopefully you all know much of this, but I think it's also helpful to just reflect. We have almost 1,300 students in 21-22. We had 5,016 professionals taking courses in CAPS. We have a $38 million budget. We brought in $750,000 in grants and contracts. We have 51 faculty and 143 staff. So 99%, looking over here at Genevieve, match rate in the PhD program. We know how much work, looking at Jan, how much work that requires on behalf of all of our faculty, our FIAs, our teams, and 100% match for the PsyD programs. Those are just some indicators of who we are as a university. 80% female identified students, 31% first-gen students. And if you think about how many of our students are graduate students, that's a very powerful number. And I think there's a lot of work that we could be doing on what does it require to be a first-gen graduate student, and I know our student success team is really thinking about this. There's a lot of attention on first-gen college students, but first-gen graduate students have their own challenges, and we all know that. And how can we support that, those folks? How many here? I was first-gen. Many people in the room, many people I'm sure out in the virtual world as well. 10% of our students are international. That is a powerful number as well. International students require additional supports. 3% of our students have some veteran or military connection. So we have a very diverse set of students. You can see from the numbers here, you'll see that we have good diversity in many ways in our ethnic and background, although I think we can do even more along these lines. So that's part of our goals for the future. I also want to mention, again, what numbers are we not including here that you'd love to see going forward? So include that in your thinking. All right. So every year, what I'm hoping is we'll do sort of a PAU by the numbers, an overview that gives a sense of the whole university. And then we'll focus in on what we were trying to accomplish in that year through our strategic plan. So every year we set a set of goals and objectives for the university and for each of your divisions. And so how are we doing in terms of meeting those goals each year? So that's sort of the report out will be regularized, as I mentioned. Late October, early November, we'll report back on how we did in the prior year. This year was the exception. Now, for 21-22, you'll remember, maybe, we were still in COVID. We were still trying to figure out how to deal with this world. And we had an overarching goal that year, which was to just simply complete the final phase of the strategic plan. So we were really at the beginning phases of this work. Our priorities for the year, these were the set at the university level. I was putting my glasses on so I can get the numbers here. These were my goals. And what's important about this is the university goals are actually set and approved by the Board of Trustees at their May meeting. So the work that we do, all of you do in your divisions to send forward your divisional goals, we then work on as a team to come up with recommendations to the board for our university goals. So in each of the pillars of our strategic plan, we set particular goals that we're trying to achieve each year. So this year, that year, my most important goal is sitting in this room, which is it was to help our amazing provost, Erica Cameron, become part of the PAU community. And I think we did a really good job on that goal. So that was a very important, but it involved a lot of other work. It involved merging creating the student success team, merging it into the Division of Academic Affairs, completing the curricular and administrative work, particularly around the undergrad program that I know is still going on now. Pillar 2, student success, we made staffing and structural improvements, especially to our enrollment management practices. It was really the first time that an enrollment management team started to meet under Erica's leadership. And now with our amazing new registrar here and our registrar team, we have a really powerful, in our admissions team, powerful work on that pillar 2. Pillar 3 is our, let me stop doing all the details and we'll go into them. I love talking about this stuff, but I want to bring us back to the foundation of our plan. Looking at our incoming chair of our new DEI our reconstituted DEI working group. So what do we mean when we say inclusive excellence is the foundation of the entire work that we do? A huge shout out to Sita for bringing this framework to our institution as we were developing the strategic plan. Demand, and I think something I heard from a lot of people over the last few years is, well, we don't have a CDO. We don't have a CDO. And if you have the inclusive excellence framework underlying the entire set of pillars that we are trying to achieve, all of us are engaged in that work, and it isn't one person's responsibility. And if you've been reading Inside Higher Ed and the Chronicle lately. The demand for DEI specialists on campus is high, turnover is higher, and many in the field say their work can be very isolating. We are trying to have it not be isolating because we were all engaged in it in some way. So it's a very different model. I think it's the right model for PAU. I think it's built into our fiber, but it takes a lot of strength on all of our parts to make sure we're bringing it into our entire operation. So big shout out to Mel for this depiction of the work. I think it's really powerful to see these dimensions of inclusive excellence, not just we have the right, number of people in certain categories. No, 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 no. It is for access and success. Are we maximizing what we do there to make sure we're meeting these goals? What is our climate and intergroup relations work? What are we doing on the curricular side, on the research side that advance these goals? In terms of infrastructure and investment, how are we thinking about these things in our development practices and other work? And in our community and partnership work, how are we bringing these things to fruition? So keep this picture and put this on your wall and let's keep this in mind as we work toward these pillars of excellence in the plan. Okay. I could say a lot about what we have done as a university in supporting the inclusive excellence outcomes. We have become an HSI serving institution. We've added Latinx merit scholarships. We have DACA scholarships in 21-22. We have a DEIB centered admissions process with the admissions team having a committee that supports its work, doing a lot of incredible work. You can no longer, we started in this 21-22 year, the inclusive search practices. You can no longer do a search for any member of the community now without going through inclusive search training. We designed and executed the first climate survey that was long overdue for sure. We hosted intergroup dialogues and training for PAU staff and employees who then went on themselves to host other conversations. We have a number of institution-wide keynote addresses and community conversations along these lines. The faculty were engaged in a huge amount of DEIB curricular review. I know the psych department and the counseling department both have been looking at their curriculum, and it started in the 21-22 year. Did I mention that we were in the middle of COVID still? All of this work went on while we were still all struggling to figure out our work. So there's so many more institutional leaders developed inclusive goals in their own divisions that advance the inclusive excellence framework. We did a communication assessment. Why am I putting that here? That's because if we can increase the frequency and transparency of our communications, we make it possible for everyone to feel part of the community. And that's part of the equity and inclusion goals. So many of the things that we've done over the last few years, and particularly in this year, were really important to this foundation. All right, moving on to pillar one, academic excellence. One conversation we still need to have as a community, and I suspect is going to be a goal of this coming year, what the heck do we mean by academic excellence? I don't think we've actually defined it, right? Provost Cameron. What do we mean by student success? So we are really starting to think, we know some things that are indicators of it for sure, and we kind of know it when we see it, perhaps. But I think going through the exercise will be really important. But for now, let's take an overview of our activities and accomplishments to just give us a sense of how we have addressed academic excellence in all of these various ways. I am so impressed with the work that the faculty did in the academic year 21-22 to advance curricular changes, course updates, a new track in the master's program. I'm looking at Dr. Bungay and the psych department work, and the PhD program in counselor education and supervision was proposed and got through the internal process, and on Friday went to WASC for final approval. So yay, yay, yay. So it's thanks to Melanie, it's relatively easy to kind of depict this work in this beautiful way. But the amount of work invested in being able to say that we made these improvements is huge. And you'll recall for many, many years, we really had 5 programs and that's it. And we didn't do a lot of addition and subtraction to those programs. So this is really the launch in 21-22 of this incredible effort on the part. Now let's look at our continuing professional studies side of the house. Shout out to the CAPS team, who, by the way, were actually so essential to us being able to broadcast out to you all today. So big shout out to them. CAPS is doing phenomenal work. I hope you all listen to the Thoughtful Counselor. It's fantastic. You get to hear Margaret and Megan and so many of our folks talk about incredible things. We have 72 new live programs were created in 21-22, 57 new on-demand programs, and a new certificate was added. That was in 21-22. Faculty awards and accomplishments. Again, I bring you back to the newsletters. Most of these things were captured in those places, but giving tenure and promotion to an incredible set of faculty and leaders in that year. Faculty distinction awards were given. We had a faculty awards ceremony to honor these things. Look at that list of grants that came in. And then the left quadrant, the national awards. Just incredible, like how many small universities of our size have that kind of recognition for our faculty at the national level. And not just recognition for awards, but leadership. Dr. Balsam playing a leadership role, Dr. Bonger, Dr. Brown, Dr. Chu, Dr. Gomez in the room, Dr. Jacoby out in Ohio, Dr. Lamar, Dr. Munoz, Dr. Tomala are all in national leadership positions in our field in that 1 year. There are others that aren't even on here. It's unbelievable. It's just the best. And then let's do a huge shout out to our Center for Educational Excellence, foundation work done by Crystal, now being led by Kristen. Everybody who runs that has to be either Crystal or Kristen. That's sort of the requirement. I'm so proud, you all know I'm a pedagogy geek. I am so proud of the work done by this center. And 21-22 was a huge year because, again, did I mention we were in COVID still? So the work that really went on to support all of you in your teaching was so incredible. And I just cannot say enough about, and thank you to all of you, by the way, who participate in these programs. This is why we keep advancing, because we're thinking together about how to do things better all the time. So you have support in your own programs. Okay, 408,000 hours of clinical service provided by our students. I mean, what else do you have to say? It's unbelievable. Where would our community partners be without those hours of service to their patients? It is so impressive. The addition of the e-clinic really revved up in 21-22. They saw 837 sessions and we're seeing 76 clients on top of the 550 or so we were seeing at Gronowski. So really exciting work going on the clinical training side of the house. It's a very powerful slide. This shows particularly, I want to highlight the PhD and PsyD programs, the huge number of applications in that year and the decrease in the acceptance rate. That suggests a strong message for the strength of our programs and the appeal that we have to the broader applicant pool. Okay. All right, so our goals for, as I said to you, after consultation with the cabinet leaders every year, the work that you all have done in your divisions, we set the annual university goals. So one of the things they help us is they help us to be purposeful in our allocation of resources to meet the goals. So when you're starting to be questioned by folks in your division about like, well, how does this advance the goals? This is why. we're actually using these goals to make sure we stay on track and moving forward. So it all fits together. I hope you're all starting to kind of see that this isn't just an exercise that went on paper. This is how we are managing across the year. So we cannot do everything. I mean, you could have a list of 1,000 things we should be doing. Every day I know other things I should be doing that I just don't get to. So we are trying to be very specific about this. So in terms of our academic excellence, as I said, managing the transition of the chief academic officer, supporting the development of the division and the curricular and administrative overhaul. Now, that one we did not 100% complete. That work is still ongoing. In fact, last week, there was a site visit for that program. So we are not always going to complete all of these goals in 1 year, but they still set our direction. And if they are worthy of us, of the work that we're doing, we set them for the following year. All right, so for student success, we focus here on the overall numbers, looking at retention, time to completion, licensure, student awards. But I come back to the earlier point of let's have a community conversation going forward about what do we really mean by student success at PAU. Very impressive first year retention numbers. You know, whenever I see something under 100, that means we have room for improvement. Let's keep going. Time to completion. Now, I want to note here something that's a little tricky about this. The on-time completion for our doctoral programs is set at 5 years. We all know average nationally is about 7 years. So it's a little bit, you know, we're kind of setting ourselves up for a kind of tricky example, but this is a good example of what are we doing to make sure people stay on track. What could we be doing better? How could we be looking year over year to improvements in these numbers? Hard to improve these numbers. So our students do exceedingly well on moving forward toward licensure. I cannot imagine very many doctoral programs in clinical psychology with over 90% licensure rates. So huge, again, it's not exactly, we don't, you know, Eric and I always talk about a lot of things happen after they leave us before they become licensed, but we set that foundation that allows them to succeed and to understand the importance of licensure in their careers. Student awards, like, you know, again, we could go on. So our student success goals, I want to shout out at one of the innovation grants that was given in the 21-22 year was focused on the communication that goes to students. And Janessa, Crystal, Sammy, I think worked on to look at every communication that students get through their time with us at PAU. Some conflicting information, some missing information, some duplicative information, right? Lots of things to learn from that kind of process. So we're really working hard to improve that. So that was one of the important gaps that we're working on. We brought on Dr. Hernandez to lead our student success team. We hired a new registrar. We launched our enrollment management team. We brought on a new director of alumni engagement. So 21-22 was a very pivotal year for PAU. Pillar 3, operational excellence. So the foundation of all this work is how do we operate as a university? How does it feel to work here? Can you get things done? We know the answer to that is not always in the timeline that we would like. So we know there's more work to be done here. But what were our goals for this pillar in the 21-22 academic year? Let's first look at some overall statistics. Okay. One thing we did not accomplish in the 21-22 year, we did a very, very wonderful search for a new CFO. Many of you were involved. We had an incredible pool of candidates in the finals. And the day that our candidate was supposed to come, he didn't come. You should receive this afternoon the new email launching the next search for the CFO. So again, we'll do this process. So like I said at the beginning, we don't always achieve our goals. We set the goal, we try to work very hard toward it, but we don't always, for reasons that sometimes are out of our control, don't always reach the goal. Staff awards and accomplishments, again, so many things in the newsletter that point out here. Regional and national leadership. Yeah, I don't know if you all know that Patty Zaff is now the editor-in-chief of the APA Handbook on Forensic Psychology, and Amanda Phaneuf is one of her associate editors. So that's just one example. Elena Dunn is doing all kinds of things with her in the national scene. There are people with new positions. We had an incredible number of new staff. Mary and her team were busy in the 21-22 year. And now it's hard to imagine not having these folks with us. So hopefully they have felt integrated into the community. We added a number of very important databases to allow for ongoing professional development. The academic impressions concept, we clarified what people can take access to courses in concept. I know some of the staff have taken a number of concept courses. We've clarified a National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. I believe we launched in the 21-22 academic year, which we're continuing. So these are ongoing professional development efforts that started in the 21-22 academic year. Provost had her strategic initiative grants, a number of which have led to some really exciting work that's still going on. And I look forward to kind of seeing the updates on that. Some of these have already led to the university wide technology mental health emphasis at PAU. I think was really sort of working really hard with that. And we had Dr. Bungay present to the Board of Trustees on some of this work in February, and they were incredibly impressed with that work. These are some of the things that we've brought on to PAU, not all in 21-22 exactly, but pretty much many of which came really fully into line. The HR team really expanded our ADP access. We brought on the Barnes & Noble bookstore for our students. We added Concur, which we're still, I think, there's some implementation things going on, but that's going to improve our payments. We have eLumen, we have HubSpot, we have Interfolio now with our faculty files. I know that's working really well. We are using Navex to catalog all of our policies and procedures. And we're using Onboard to manage our Board of Trustees, which is, and our cabinet work, which has been a really effective innovation for us. So these are things, if you know of things, you have ideas, you've worked things at other universities, bring those ideas forward, because these are the kinds of things that make for operational efficiency, right? If we can improve our processes, things get better. We brought on an incredible cohort of trustees in the 21-22 year. The Honorable Jim Bell, former state senator, leading proponent of mental health parity legislation. Dr. Marianne Dewan, who's the county superintendent of schools in Santa Clara County, and Key Lee, who is the deputy county executive in Santa Clara. So we did a big push in the 21-22 year to bring engaged, powerful community members onto the PAU board to give us better access to resources, to connect us to community. And it's really, really working well. I could say a lot more about that, but so for our specific goals and outcomes for operational excellence, really focused on the professional development, hosting our professional development days, still some work to be done there for sure. As I mentioned, all of the resources that we brought on board, and we launched the Committee on Committees, which is the weirdest, funny name of all time, but it is really an effort to try to make greater clarity around our committee's work. What are their charters? How do you get onto them? Who can be on them? How do I get onto a committee? What are the committees doing? How do we learn about what all the committees are doing? There's some incredible work going on throughout the university, in the compliance committee and in the curriculum committee and so many other ways. If we can help to clarify kind of the overall approaches that those committees take, and you know how to find that information, you know, hey, I'd like to think about that committee. How do I get onto that committee? It's not glamorous work, but it's really important back-end work to our operational efficiency. Okay, pillar 4, awareness. This is a very important part of our overall plan. It's like we don't want people to not know who we are. Those in the know, know, but we want all to know, right? So in this case, we're going to look at brand. I know we hate that word in academia. I resisted it for so long in my own, like, still kind of makes me, but it's important to own who we are and to make sure people understand what we stand for. And that's really how I think about the brand. And I think it's really amazing the work that we've done to really improve our brand, our look, our, all of it is sort of works on making sure the public understands us. We have done some pretty serious, since the external affairs team, some impressive brand awareness work. We were on KQED in 21-22. Some of you may have heard that. We had many impressions of our many more hits on our website, like all kinds of things related to upping our brand awareness. We had, this is all this, admissions lead now is really, we're working very hard. And I know that the admissions team and Division of Academic and Student Affairs is thinking very hard from an enrollment management process, how to bring that cost per application down. So how do we sort of do a broader outreach and actually, secure more applicants without, not without having to use those resources to pull them in. So that's important work that is ongoing. Marketing work is kind of amazing. So 256,583 total website visitors in the 21-22 academic year. That's a lot of people seeing our material. It gives you a sense of how important the website is and how much even more work we need to be doing to make sure we have all of your information on there, that we have all the photos we need, all the updated information about the incredible work that's going on at PAU. CAPS marketing is it's like a well-oiled machine. If any of you ever want to understand marketing, you could talk to the CAPS team. I don't even know what to highlight here, but it's 6,400 people following on social media, 4% organic social media engagement, which is really high, I'm told, 1.5 million paid media impressions. So the work on CAPS, what we have to understand about that, not only are we providing graduate level education at the professional level, all of that brings people to understand what PAU is, brings them to our website, brings them to learn about PAU. So it does what it does really well, but it also adds to our overall awareness focus. And big shout out, we brought on Chloe Corcoran in the 21-22 academic year, our wonderful alumni engagement director, and Chloe's work has already produced tremendous increases in connection to our alums. But again, year over year, I think we're going to see lots of increases here. This was Chloe and alums at the APA meeting in Minnesota that year. I'm going to be at the meeting in DC in August. I don't know how many others of you will be there, but we're going to have a big event with alums and all of you who are there. So put that on your calendar for the summer. So we finalized the alumni engagement strategies and staffing, yes. And we finalized the community engagement strategies and staffing after the work that Crystal Nizal did in the communications study, a year-long 21-22 was really the entire year we spent looking at our overall communication strategies. Many of you were in focus groups and conversations about this, culminating in bringing Crystal into my office so that we could be better planned, we could be more planful, we could be more effective and strategic in our work in communications, both internally and externally. So big shout out to Crystal for all of her help on that. Okay, financial strength. How am I doing on time? Pretty good, pretty good. Okay, this is our pillar 5. If, in some ways, if we don't have this, we don't, as the Silicon Valley Bank has understood, we don't have anything. So this is very important. We spend a lot of time thinking about this and being very, very, for me, I've said this to some of you from the time I walked in the place, but for me, every dollar we spend should do three things. It should never just do one thing. So how do we make the best use of every one of those dollars to make sure we're managing our resources in the most effective way? All right. So there are a number of indicators of financial strength. We'll go through a few of them. There may be others that we want to add in the years to come. But this one, to me, is the most important number. So every private nonprofit university in the country is tuition dependent. It's important for our overall business model and our financial health to broaden our sources of revenue beyond tuition and fees. We cannot increase the size of, nor want to increase, we decrease the size of our PhD program. We cannot change the size of our PsyD program. We really cannot change the size of some of our other programs, right? We're not trying to just keep growing. We have to have other sources of revenue, be other programs, it can be certificates, it can be more professional studies, it can be a lot of things. A 4% decrease in the proportion of our revenue coming from tuition is what occurred in the 21-22 academic year. So that is a very big number. It sounds like a small number, but it's moved our needle. So that means that we are broadening the sources of revenue that support the university. The more we can do that as a community, as a team working together, there may be some things at the clinic. I'm looking out at our clinic leadership here. There's some things we could do with the clinic potentially, with some contracting and some other things. I think there are other ways that we can support the financial strength of the university. But in this year, 21-22, we did a really good job. So the other important number is look at the decrease in the dependence on the PhD program. I also think this is an important trend. When I first arrived, the amount of revenue that we were relying on for the PhD program was much higher than this. So what this means is we've been able to reduce the size of the PhD program, increase the size of a few of the other programs and other sources of revenue so that we are not as dependent on bringing in more and more PhD students, right? That was when I arrived, that was kind of what was happening. It was like kept getting bigger, kept getting bigger. Now it's gotten smaller and we need to keep that number. So that reducing the dependence on that program is very, very important. It's a fantastic program, don't get me wrong, but we want, and the other important number here is look at our dependence now on our mental health counseling program, right? Almost 30% of the revenue coming now from mental health counseling. So huge shout out to the counseling department. So sources of non-tuition revenue, as I said, we have now interest income. We're working on building that up, contributions, clinic income, grant income, CAPS income. What are some of the other categories we might be able to add to this list going forward? On the expense side, that little purple piece of the pie, that 10% discretionary, is really what we have to budget with. Almost all of our other expenses are either salary and taxes and benefits, fixed costs, which are things like rent for this building, insurance, other expenses related to facilities, and semi-fixed costs, which are things like the library subscriptions, and very, very important, maybe perhaps non-fixed in the sense we could increase or decrease, perhaps, but not and be the university we want to be, right? So even semi-fixed is pretty solid. So whenever we're thinking about how to, what we'd love to do is increase the overall sources of revenue and overall not tuition dependent revenue so that we have more support to provide for new initiatives, for ideas, for things that we want to do in the future. So I think this pie has stayed similar over the years, but looking year over year, let's try to increase our availability of discretionary money. Our investments have done quite well. So the board had set a goal, and in the 21-22 year, we actually met the goal, which was to have 4 months of reserves in our investment funds. So we now have that. We had none when I arrived. So this has been very, very important for me to make sure of the long-term stability of the university. And we have been more strategic in how we manage our investments. So I'm very pleased with the work there. And again, you know, love to be able to increase the number. You see now we have 6, and I think 5 or 6, I'm looking at Ann over there, endowed scholarships, which means they have come in with at least $50,000 in the scholarship, and those will go on in perpetuity and will spin off 4.5, 5, whatever the number is, 4.5, 4% for our students, but they will stay there permanently in our endowment. So we are working very hard to bring in additional endowed scholarships, which are benefiting both the overall university and of course our students. And here they are. Big shout out to these incredible families that have supported PAU for so many years. Very proud of the Christine Blasey Ford Endowed Fund, which the board established when she was in the throes of the challenges that she had and the amazing courage that she was showing to the nation. The board honored her with this endowed fellowship, which and I have to tell you, reading the applications every year for the students who apply to that scholarship is really all you need any year, to have that one day where you get to read those applications from our students and what her courage meant to them and how they plan to use their own work in advocacy for change. Really powerful. So if you have ideas for scholarships, let me know. So CAPS is bringing in close to $1.5 million in revenue, working very hard to build and expand the program offerings in CAPS. We now offer either 7 or 8 certificates. In 21-22, we were just starting that process. So big shout out to the CAPS team. So the goal for the 21-22 year was to produce year-over-year increase in the percentage of non-tuition revenue, and that goal we met. So very, very proud of that work. Okay. Okay, numbers, lots of numbers. The numbers are important, and I want you all to have them and to be familiar with them and to contribute to them and to understand them, but they only are an indicator of people and of the work that all of you do. They don't themselves tell the story. You all tell the story. You out in the virtual world and those of you in the room tell the story. And that is one of the reasons we also wanted our strategic plan to set out a set of community values. So you'll recall that after the board approved the overall framework of the strategic plan in May of 2021, so during this academic year we're reporting on, the board asked us as a community to further develop the values. The board said to me, which I really appreciated actually, why are we setting the values? That's the community's job. So we took on that challenge, staff council, lots of work went on. We produced a set of values that we presented back to the board in the spring of 2022. These were the values that we came up with as a community: equity and inclusion, community, excellence and integrity, compassion, and innovation. And every day I sort of think about I have this on my, I have a post-it of this on my computer, and I think, how are we advancing these values? What am I doing today that advances these values? How could we do better at advancing these values? So I think, I want us to feel these. I want us to embody them as a set of commitments that our community has. And speaking of community, this first year, we selected, the leadership of Provost Cameron, we selected the value of community to, not looking back to 21, 22 now, but looking to this year. Unifying our mission and vision, celebrating our mutual success, and thinking much more specifically and strategically about how are we building community, expanding opportunities to engage, improving communication. We're working really hard to make sure you all have the information you need, that we're telling people what's going on, that people know where to go for information. We're not perfect on this, believe me. I know we have a lot more work to do, but the opening event, I think, was a really good example of community, bringing our community into our community. Our convocation was an incredible day of community. Commencement, of course, is always an incredible day of community. But these values should be lived and should feel like this is what you feel like in your work at PAU. So, coming up, we did set goals for the 22-23 academic year, the current year that we're in. These were approved by the board in May of 2022. We will go back to the board in May of 2023 for the coming academic year goals. So these were ambitious and we're working very hard. So provide the infrastructure and drive PAU's development and innovative academic programs. Lots of work going on, looking out at faculty members I know doing a lot of this work right now. Re-examine processes and opportunities for clinical training. Boy, are we doing that. That is certainly going on this year, particularly manifesting inclusive excellence in that work. Re-examining our processes and opportunities for academic training at all levels with those values in mind. Academic excellence. For student success, really working to enhance and strengthen student support services. Some of you maybe have been talking to Aviva and others about, and Diana, about how to better support our students. What would be the best way to do that? Not just throw things at them, but really think strategically about how to better support them. And given where they are now, like we're in a different world now. So what do they need now? And then strategically allocate financial resources to meet those needs. For our pillar 3, operational efficiency, develop the infrastructure for ongoing staff professional development. That is a work in progress. We did quite a bit in the fall. We had a great staff development day. We had monthly meetings. We're working to have more online available staff development, but there's still work to be done there. Research and establish standards for operational excellence related to residential and remote employees. So this is work that we've been doing that's just about to be finalized. We're getting input. I think we've gotten input from the faculty. We're working on staff input, but clarity around what does it mean to be residential employee? What does it mean to be a remote employee? Understanding that and making sure we are treating everybody equitably and the same across those domains. Complete the needs assessment of major technology systems. Big shout out again to Patty Zaff and her team, and to our institutional research team. They are doing a project looking at our institutional research structures, the data architecture, et cetera. We've had Forelli, we've been working with our IT team on an outside consultant looking at our CRM, potential CRM development. So we've been spending a lot of energy on this. I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're spending a lot of time worrying about this. Pillar 4, awareness, alumni engagement plan, I think is check. I think we've already worked on that. And then increasing community visibility through engagement and other strategies. I've certainly amped up my engagement in the community, partly because I have such an amazing team leading the university. I can go out. I've spoken to many, many community groups. I'm in many meetings. I'm constantly sort of working on getting PAU at tables that we need to be at. So spending a lot of time engaging with the external community. Just the other day, the Association of Independent California Colleges and Universities wrote to me and to President Nealon at the Chicago School on 2 pieces of legislation that are coming down in California, wanting our input, getting our thoughts. I'm working with ACU right now on drafting a response to the horrifying potential Supreme Court decision coming down on affirmative action. There's lots of, I was in Washington, D.C. recently lobbying on behalf of doubling the Pell Grant for our students. So trying to be at the tables where those important external audiences can learn from PAU. Pillar 5, we're working very hard on developing business model, thinking more broadly about our business model, moving away from reliance on increasing tuition, increasing enrollment, and thinking much more strategically about our model, including some partnerships that we've been working with Dr. Bungay, Dr. Taylor, and others to potentially broaden that perspective. And then hopefully integrate a new CFO into our community. Shout out to our interim CFO, Helen Willett, and our CFO consultant, Laura Hazlitt, and to our amazing business affairs team who've kind of kept us going through this challenging time, but we're hoping to get that resolved in the coming year. So on the horizon, other regular communications, we're trying very hard to make these regularized so you can expect to find communications coming so you're going to get information. CAPS also sends out regular overviews. Chloe's now sending out an alumni newsletter. The admissions team, sends many communications, particularly to our accepted students, keeping them, the student news digest comes to students with opportunities. So send ideas you may have on this institutional, divisional, and community communications. How can we be even better? We're hoping that the new headlines and happenings that's going to come out every month that will report on sort of policy changes, governance decisions that were made, as well as other actions going on. Hopefully that monthly will be a lot more effective than trying to tell you every week what we're doing, which seemed a little redundant. So take a look out for that, but also let us know if there's other ways we could be doing this. Set the goals and hopes for the year, every year at convocation, right? So that's another way we're sort of trying to regularize these things. Review the prior academic year's achievements in November. So that's going to be a regularizing of this process. And of course, celebrating all that we do at commencement in June. Just very briefly, 2025 will be PAU's 50th anniversary. So we are just beginning to think about what a celebration of that might look like. What would be the academic side of things? What would be the event side of things? What might be the gala? Do we want to have some big speaker? My dream is to have Lady Gaga's speaker. What should we be doing to really not look back 50 years, but we have the next half century coming. What do we do? What do we want to be when we grow up? Right? What is it? What can we do? And how can this celebration help us to move us into that future? So if you want to get involved, let me know. Okay, that's it. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all in the virtual world. Take care.